You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Hello everyone and welcome to Force 13 Live. Tonight we're going to be talking about a really unexpected and quite unfortunate situation that's beginning to unfold. Cyclone Yasa is a Category 5 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale with winds of 160 miles per hour and a pressure of 915 millibars. It's really dangerous, and it's something that we've been talking about all day here on Force 13. We've been monitoring this, watching it like a hawk, and we have called it a Category 5 at this point. On the team with me tonight to talk about it, I have Christian, Dakota, Farhan, Kay, and Strat. How are all of you doing tonight?
Good evening.
Very good.
I'm doing
Good
fine.
morning.
Unseasonably unfortunate situation to develop. I think this is one of the earliest, at least on the Saffir-Simpson scales, Category 5.
It is the
Basis
earliest by
5.
12 days in the South Pacific on record.
This is again another 2020 record.
Another unprecedented event in 2020. What else can I say?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically stage 8 on CDPS, if I'm correct.
Yep.
Yeah, which I just can't. I mean, my update video I believe was yesterday, and by that time it was Category 1 approaching Category 2. And just to see less than a day later how far it's come.
It has overcome its growing pains, which has been experiencing for the last 2-3 days. Over the last 24 hours, sort of just able to finally overcome it and sort of just ramps up in intensity.
And the worst part about it,
in what we see right now.
yeah, and the worst part about it is that this thing is going straight for Fiji and will likely not weaken too substantially before it gets there.
Yeah.
Some weakening is currently anticipated before it makes landfall or a very close approach to the nation, but not much, and any variance in wind speed won't change the overall message about potential threats to the nation. You have the Prime Minister of the country giving a speech to the whole country, urging everyone to have evacuation plans and to make sure that they're boarding up their homes, preparing emergency supplies, and have a route to their nearest evacuation center if necessary. You're talking about a situation where right now it's just past noon Fiji time. This is the last full day where people will really be able to prepare before conditions deteriorate much more overnight as you head into tomorrow and the storm makes a much closer approach to land.
Yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely unprecedented. Here is the, that was the sitrep. Here is, RSMC Fiji's cone for this thing, and they have it maintaining Category 5 on the Australian scale all the way through Fiji, and even well afterwards. They say that by the 19th, this thing will still be a Category 5 on the AU scale.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's going to be crossing Fiji or very close to it, the official forecast from the JTWC and the RSMC have this thing pulling barely east of Fiji, but many of the major models, including the GFS and HWRF, are calling for direct landfall. That's going to have some hold in its strength down the line. But regardless, you're still looking at a most likely significant storm, even well past Fiji's landfall.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be taking a look at something that is absolutely catastrophic. Would it be fair to argue that this will likely be the worst storm since Winston for Fiji?
I don't think there's any contest to that question.
It's the first strong storm to have passed there since Winston. Since Winston. So there's not really any question about that.
Yeah, it definitely won't be as bad as Winston, at least we hope. But it's, as of now, still looking like it's going to be quite gnarly. Force 13 forecasted a 150 mile per hour landfall for this thing as of just 3 hours ago. Do we think that could be higher? Do we think a Category 5 Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale landfall is on the cards for this?
It's unlikely, but I'd say at this point, many things that are less likely have happened.
Yeah, I would note...
Looking at Michael and Dorian particularly.
Yeah, I would note particularly though that any difference, whether or not it's 140, 150, or 160, while that'll have some minor differences for whoever receives those direct strongest winds for some of the damage, if it's a 20-mile-an-hour difference, the broader impacts that people as a whole, because the landfall location, if that occurs, isn't pinned down yet, should be paying attention to, is that you're still talking about a Category 5 storm on the Australian scale at landfall or passing just miles offshore of Fiji, and then you're going to have storm surge that comes along with that. So keep an eye out on that if you're on the wrong side of the storm. And then you're also having widespread heavy rainfall totals, especially if the center passes over shore. Some models are showing upwards of 750 millimeters in isolated areas across the country. But regionally, you're still looking at broad areas in Fiji with 400 to 500 millimeters plus of rain. And that's, of course, going to bring life-threatening flooding risks, mudslide risks, etc. And people need to be taking those risks very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, rainfall is a huge risk with this. Again, earlier today, actually, I ran a C2PS fix. It was at stage 8. It was high-end stage 8. And I'll tell you why. It's because the rainfall has risen up to about 650 millimeters being the area, like the locally highest area. So like about 450 millimeters on a more widespread basis is expected, with local areas up to 650. And there's one model in particular, the H-WRF, which overblows this stuff, which shows well over 1,500 millimeters of rain falling in some areas. So I think that the possibility that the rainfall threat is even worse than we're anticipating right now is definitely there. The H-WRF certainly has a high bias for this kind of stuff, but I certainly think that places getting over 1,000 millimeters of rain can't be ruled out. So, of the 3 different forecasts, we have Force 13s, we have Fiji's, and we have the Joint Typhoon Warning Centers. What are the common messages that we're seeing between all 3 of them? What should people be taking away?
The common message is that this storm isn't done strengthening yet, and it still has time to keep getting stronger. Beyond that period, we don't know how fast it's going to weaken, because while shear is expected to increase, it's going to enter into a region of increased instability that will help support the convection, even if it starts being disrupted a bit. So we don't know how that interaction is going to work out. It could weaken quite a bit. It could strengthen further despite the increase in shear, and equally there could be an unpredictable eye-wall replacement cycle. And the combination of all these factors means that the intensity as we approach landfall is highly uncertain. Regardless, we're expecting a Category 5 Australian scale landfall, a Category 4 minimum Saffir-Simpson landfall, and people in these areas really need to be taking action now and not later.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And, even though the storm is pretty small in size compared to some of the other storms we've seen across the world this year, using Fiji as a scale makes it look deceptively large at the time being. Right now, it only has gale winds extending up to 110 nautical miles from the center, so you're talking a little over 150 kilometers. Despite that, all the models right now have this, and forecasts have this, either barely missing landfall in the main island of Fiji, as the JTWC and local RSMC forecast, along with the European model. But then you also have other models consider, which are very possible solutions and within very slight margins of errors and within those cones, that any south or westward deviation would drag the actual eye of the storm over Fiji. But like Kay said, regardless of uncertainties, and this is stressed by the Prime Minister, everyone in Fiji should be preparing potential evacuation plans and completing preparations imminently during the daytime today, if possible. You don't want to get caught in a situation where you're underprepared at the last moment and have to rush to do things that you're not ready to do in an unsafe environment.
Especially if you're in a coastal area. Those are going to be vulnerable to storm surge, and they're at highest risk from this cyclone. So if you're anywhere that's within 20 or 30 feet above sea level, I would recommend evacuating for your own safety.
Yeah, that's a smart thing for people to do right now.
Yeah, and
Uh,
interestingly, there haven't been
running out
specific
of them.
evacuation orders placed yet for
Well, that's
certain
because we don't
locations.
know where it's going to go.
Exactly,
So
but
I would
that's
make
that's why it's
preparations
important.
to move if you're in a vulnerable location. You would know if your area is vulnerable to surge. Having been through enough cyclones, I presume people would have a reasonable understanding of which areas do get flooded and which areas don't in intense cyclone landfalls. But we don't know where it's going to go. It could go to the western edge of the um, southern island. It could go between the two main islands. It could go quite further east, and that would mean a big disparity in impacts for a specific location because of this relatively compact cyclone that we're dealing with.
It is extremely difficult to predict where exactly is going to get the worst of the impacts. But regardless of that, I think the most important message is that everyone along the coast there, when we say make preparations, we're saying make preparations as if you're going to get hit by the center of a 160 mile per hour system. Um, there's a possibility, there's a really good possibility that's not what's going to happen for your specific location. Regardless of that, it's extremely important that you do, because there is a chance, and if you're not ready and that chance does verify, that can lead to catastrophic implications, including the loss of your life. So that's why we stress so much. Prepare for this. Take it seriously. This is a big one. This is like one that you guys haven't seen over there in Fiji for a long time. So it's been when was Winston?
It was in February
I
of
think it
2016, if I
was,
recall correctly. So
yeah, it
that
was
would be coming
2016.
up on 4 years.
Yeah, we've unfortunately just had to say it so many times this year for many places across the world, but it really is always better to be overprepared than underprepared, especially when you're talking about a storm that's currently a Category 5 equivalent on both the Australian and Saffir-Simpson scale. That's why the Prime Minister is urging everyone to already be preparing potential evacuation plans and to make sure that you're boarding up your own properties and making sure that you have all your emergency supplies. I do want to stress again, it is still broad daylight out there. It's 12 p.m. local time. Make sure you're doing that stuff today when you have the best chance to do it. If you're talking about 20 hours from now, conditions might be significantly less safe at that point in time, and you really want to make sure you're prepared before conditions start to head downhill at a much quicker pace.
Something
I
I'm
think this
seeing
is the
here,
last full day people have to prepare for the storm.
something I'm seeing here
After
is that
that,
from Thursday afternoon
basically,
local
yeah.
time, bus services are being suspended until the storm passes. So if you're trying to do anything last minute, which we strongly recommend against doing, you won't be able to use a bus to do it because for their own safety, the drivers will be not driving their buses, which is very reasonable.
Yes, prepare now. If you're thinking about procrastinating, doing it now or doing it later, do it now. First of all, you won't have to worry about it later. And second of all, you may not have a later. There's a significant possibility that once conditions begin to deteriorate even just a little bit, things will rapidly go downhill from there. So,
And if I may, looking at the latest satellite imagery, I believe conditions are already starting to deteriorate over on main island Fiji.
Well, the outermost bands are bringing rainfall to these areas, and it's very minimal impacts compared to what will follow when the core of the storm arrives. But yes, you are correct in saying that conditions are not perfect at this point, and they are only going to get worse from here on in.
yeah, I mean, we're seeing these significant outer bands that are moving in from this system. And I think that the other thing to note is that we're going to be seeing wave heights slowly increasing with time. We're going to be seeing all kinds of stuff. But you're going to see the beginnings of some rising waters here as the storm moves closer. And with a storm like this, I mean, you're going to be expecting some pretty decent storm surge.
Something that I'd like to make the point of with a small and compact system that's expected to be moving at least a normal, if not slightly above average speed by the time it gets to Fiji, there will be a very quick uptick in the strength of the winds and the impacts from the storm. It won't be like a larger storm where it builds and builds and builds and builds and gets worse and worse and worse. It will be much more sudden and sort of like flicking on a switch when the eye wall arrives. and you want to be fully prepared and in a safe place before that gets there. Because many a times people have been caught out by small, intense tropical cyclones. They just don't expect the conditions to get as bad as fast as they do. And for example, in the Labor Day hurricane, that's why quite a few people lost their lives, because it got so bad so fast they couldn't get to a safe place.
Yeah, I mean, because things will go from 0 to 100 really quick, quite literally.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You know, it's going to be, you're going to have winds slowly ramp up for a bit. It's going to go 40, 45, 60, 70. You're going to then have a jump. You know, if you guys over there in Fiji have seen like reconnaissance flights in the Atlantic, you'll see in compact systems like Delta that huge spike in wind speeds. You go from around tropical storm force to minimal hurricane force to well into Cat 4 in a very short distance. So, I mean, the radius of maximum winds, the radius of those strong winds within the storm is extremely small. So I think that point is really good to bring up. I mean, the conditions are going to go from bad to much, much worse in an exceptionally short period of time for those closest to the core of the storm.
Yeah, and I just want to bring up this really quick as well, because Tim was able to provide these, and I'll actually post the website to this as well in the chat briefly. But if you refresh your page, if it isn't there automatically, there are some local emergency numbers that you can use if you're in Fiji. If you need them, use them only in case of emergency during event, or one of them is for preparatory reasons to find where your nearest evacuation center is located. You know, those are resources available, and if you're not sure about something regarding that or have an emergency situation, make sure you're using those in cases of emergency.
Absolutely. I do want to move on for a little bit. We'll get back to Yasa in a moment, but I do just want to talk about the fact that we do have other things going on in the world. And by that, I mean we have a thing to the southeast that I just want to talk about for just a minute. I believe we have it at winds of 65 miles per hour. And, I mean, it's Zazu's transitioning into an extratropical system, I think, right now. It's probably not going to be tropical for too much longer, but I think it's worth just mentioning what else is going on around the world for just a minute. So what are our thoughts on this? I'd assume that we haven't been looking at this much, but 65 miles an hour, 982 millibars.
Oh, that thing is a mess that is being sheared to death. It does not have much longer.
It is, however, bringing some impact towards Tonga, a bit of rain, a bit of winds. Nothing too extreme, but it is there. Nothing compared to what Yasa will bring to Fiji, but it's still there.
Yeah, certainly. I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. I'm not sure if anyone else on the team has many thoughts about that.
I guess really the only add-on right now to Yasa, because fortunately it's moving away from land, is that it's probably going to have a bit of an interesting life as a post-tropical cyclone, because it's supposed to stop moving south in less than 2 days and then kind of just bend eastward for a while into the southeastern Pacific Ocean. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And then, with that being said, I do also just want to talk about what's going on around the world right now. We have a few things that we're watching for. In the Western Pacific, I know that we have a storm that'll likely develop near Mindanao within the next few days. The chances for this have slowly been rising, but at least ensemble models that I've been looking at have continued to increase in confidence that something will develop. How strong it will get, that's the uncertainty. But overall, I mean, we have that. We have some stuff in the southern Indian Ocean as well. And the most interesting thing is I know that Nathan, when he was here, before he had to go, he spotted something in the Mediterranean. So is there any interesting or concerning developments around the world that we could see within the next week or two, you guys think?
Absolutely. There's an area we're watching off the north coast of Australia. We're expecting it to move westwards and develop off the northwest coast of Australia. And we are currently expecting it to make a cyclone landfall on the west coast of Australia on or around the Christmas period, which is very unfortunate timing. And The model output is currently suggesting that could be as strong as a major hurricane equivalent cyclone when it does make landfall. So that's the next highest area of concern after the immediate threat posed by Yasa.
Yeah, I mean, that is the next area of immediate concern. I did just want to touch on what's going on around the world for those in our chat and those that are watching that were curious about it. Here's the ensembles for this system that could form near Australia. Definitely something of concern, but with that being said, I think that we all have our primary focus on Yasa right now, and so with that being said, to the team, if you have anything that you really want to say about this that we haven't managed to cover yet,
I do have something.
that would be something that we could talk about real quick while we're waiting for some questions. So if you have any questions for us, please tag at Force13. It'll light up in a bright orange for us, so that way we can answer your questions. But with that being said, while we're waiting for those, Kay, what do you want to say?
I'm seeing here from a Fijian media group that made one of their articles on Yasa. They are saying here that a senior forecaster at the Fiji Meteorological Services, Stephen Meek, confirms that Fijians should expect the same conditions that were encountered during the height of Winston in 2016. So Fiji Meteorological Service is saying that you should prepare for the worst that you've experienced.
Yep.
Because it could be just as bad.
Yeah, and some news coming in as well pretty recently as well. Thanks to people in our team that are actually posting these news links. Right now, all schools are closed except for Year 12 and 13 students who are taking their exams, and then they won't have stuff after that. And also, the Emergency Operations Center for Fiji is activated for 24-hour operations. So there's going to be continuous news that comes out, but the government is taking preparatory measures ahead of the storm's approach, and it shouldn't just be them that's doing it. If you're in the path of the system, make sure you're preparing as well.
Yeah, I think that is certainly true. I mean, this system is it's just terrifying. It's a terrifying prospect to think that it could be as bad as Winston. You know, the fact that a senior forecaster at the Fiji Meteorological Agency is saying that that's a possibility is...
Well, it's not just that he's saying it's a possibility. He's saying that Fijians should be preparing as if it will be the case to make sure they're adequately prepared for this cyclone. And when you're saying you should prepare for a incredibly powerful Category 5 landfall, that's basically preparing for the worst possible.
Yeah.
It is the logical thing to do, however. I mean, people certainly still remember Winston over there, and it is the utmost importance to know that it is coming and that it could be very bad as soon as possible so that people didn't get caught up as in Winston. So that's very important.
I mean, the time for people to do stuff to prepare for the storm is right now. Time is running out. Eventually, they're not going to have any time left to do anything. And they're going to be caught, and it's not going to end well for them.
No, it's not looking good when it comes to the ultimate outcome of this system. I know just a few days ago, the expectation was that it was going to go in between Vanuatu and Fiji, and we weren't going to have to worry much about land impacts. That's changed completely
really
in the past
has,
couple of days.
It completely stall and then do a loop-de-loop, a very slow loop-de-loop, and
Some background issues there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd like to also note that Fiji radar is picking up the outer bands of the cyclone, and there could be some telltale signs here that it might be about to be able to sample part of the eye wall of the cyclone, although it is kind of hard to tell looking at the radar itself. But regardless, looks like some heavy rain heading from the outer bands heading towards Fiji right now from the cyclone.
Alright, and let's pull up that radar on the screen here, and you can see that heavy rain as it is continuing to move towards Fiji. I mean, this is going to be the first real impacts that people in Fiji have seen from this cyclone at this point. So this is when conditions are really going to start to go downhill, and from here it's gradually just going to get worse and worse, wave after wave of these outer bands, and then that core is going to be arriving. We'll be live, I know, tomorrow night for this as well, and I know that we'll also be holding landfall coverage on Thursday. So we have, we're going to be covering this all the way through, but I mean, conditions only get worse from here. Time is seriously running out for preparations to be made. We do have quite a few questions that have been asked, so I would like to start with those. First of all, do we think there's a possibility that this will peak at 175 miles per hour?
It's entirely within reason that it could get that far given how much time it has in favourable conditions. At the moment, it appears to be roughly holding intensity. The satellite intensity estimates have not changed from 6 hours ago. They're holding at T7.0 on the Dvorak, which is equivalent to 140 knots or Category 5 Saffir-Simpson. However, when you look at the satellite loops over the last few hours, there are improvements in the eye shape, there are improvements in the CDO structure, and the cloud tops are gradually increasing in height and temperature. And what that means is that this cyclone is still likely gradually intensifying, although at least for now the rapid intensification appears to have stopped.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any good news from this, I guess that would be it. This storm isn't rapidly deepening right now, and I mean, we could definitely eat our words on that.
I mean, it's gradually intensifying still is what I would say. I wouldn't say it's holding. It still looks to be improving gradually, but certainly not at the rate we saw just 12 hours ago.
I think that is a fair assessment to make. We have another question here. Here, just a moment. I need to actually find it. Do we have any thoughts about the winter storm heading up the East Coast? I just wanted to bring this up briefly because I just wanted to say we're not going to be really talking about that on this stream, but if you do have questions about that, we'll be holding an hour, I believe, tomorrow on that. We'll be holding an hour tomorrow at around noon Central Time, 1 Eastern Time on the US channel. So that would be where you could find stuff on that. We have a lot of questions about what we think the maximum intensity of this storm will be. So I guess overall, I can just go down the line with each team member. What do you think the peak of this storm will be? I guess we'll start with you, Isaac. I know you really are good with analyzing satellite. What do you think about the peak of this storm? What do you think the storm's going to peak at, if you had to give a guess?
Well, I would really want to wait the next few hours here and see if it tries to maintain its satellite appearance here, continues to improve it, as well as wait for it to reach radar range of the Fiji radar sites to really get a better estimate on planes. I'm not really good at estimating these storms. However, of course, I am showing a lot of imagery of it here, as you can see. I mean, I would definitely say it is possible for it to continue strengthening, like Kay said. 175 miles per hour. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the storm to get to there. I mean, I would hope not that I would hope that it doesn't reach that status, but you never know with these things. Let's hope not, but hope everybody in Fiji is preparing for this storm. Looks like it, at least from what I'm seeing on social media here. And that's the good thing with this particular scenario. I think with Winston, they weren't really taking it that seriously until it was right on top of them. So I think they have learned some lessons from that cyclone that hit them in 2016.
Yeah, let's hope so. Something else, we have another question here. Someone's saying, is there a possibility that this defies expectations like Goni did?
There is. Unfortunately, that is a possibility.
It's done that all day.
2 days out in favourable conditions, so you never know.
It's only did that. We only expected to be Category 4 at this point, but here we are.
Goni, was a monster.
I mean, we can even observe right now that there's some setup for this. It looks like structural improvements are occurring right now within this storm. The eye's really cleared out and warmed up, I feel like, in the latest frames. The amount of minus 80s has gone down a little bit, but I feel like overall the storm's appearance is improving, and we're seeing these new wrapping features on infrared, basically where we're getting a much tighter ring of minus 70s trying to wrap around that eye. If that manages to happen, I think we could see a little bit of a contraction within the eye wall, and we could begin to see deepening occur more rapidly, unfortunately. So we're going to have to watch this, but this is looking like a really serious situation for those down in Fiji right now, regardless of how strong it ultimately is when it gets there.
I'd like to point out that currently the National Disaster Management Office of Fiji is holding a media briefing. I'm not sure if it's live or anything, but it will be something that Fijians will definitely be seeing, if not right now, but very soon, about what to expect, how bad it will be, and what should they do.
Yeah. We have another question here. Is this storm annular? I think the simplest answer is it's not. I mean, it looks pretty decent. If you look at just the core, it's fairly symmetrical, but because of the way the outflow is, because of a variety of features within the storm, I think that we can say pretty safely this is not an annular system.
Well, there are two reasons why it's not annular. The first is that it has lots of banding on microwave beneath the cloud tops, which is the main reason why it's not annular. But the second reason why it's not annular is because it's not got a large enough eye. The eye is an average size for a tropical cyclone. It just looks so big compared to the storm because the storm itself isn't that large in terms of the size of the CDO. So the eye is made to look bigger by comparison because of the zoom of the imagery. If you were to zoom out and have the image next to a fully annular storm, you would see a noticeable difference in the size of the eye and the structure. It's just when you zoom in on something, it can look similar to something else, but it's not big enough, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it is pretty safe to say it's not. It still does look very impressive regardless.
Evacuation order has been issued for a village. Oh goodness me, how am I supposed to pronounce this? Nava Kawau. God, I probably just butchered that. But evacuation order have been issued there and expected to take place over the next 12 hours.
We have another question here. How much longer could Yasa intensify, and how favorable are the conditions between the storm and Fiji? I mean, right now, it could intensify all the way up to landfall. We've gone over that earlier in the stream. But shear's expected to increase a bit. Kay, I know that you were talking about the conditions and what to expect exactly with this. But you're saying perhaps there's some features that could negate the shear, correct?
Yes, shear is going to increase, but the same system that's increasing the shear is going to introduce increased atmospheric instability or baroclinic forcing to the system. That term's become quite notorious in recent years for people tracking in the Atlantic. It's caused rather unusual intensification in a number of significant systems, notably Michael. It's mainly what allowed Michael to get so strong so late in the season. However, in this case, we're looking more as it's allowing the system to maintain in the face of shear longer than it might otherwise be able to. And with that extra uncertainty, it's basically increasing the range at which this storm could landfall. If the shear is more than expected, the instability doesn't help it much, and an idle replacement cycle starts, this could get down all the way down to a very low end Cat 5 Australian, Cat 4 Saffir-Simpson. But equally, if the shear is less impactful than expected and the instability helps the storm a lot more, and it intensifies further in the short term, we could still be looking at a Cat 5 landfall on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And that would honestly be the worst case scenario at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really good analysis of what exactly is going on here. We have another question here. Someone saying, I'm not sure, I don't think this has occurred. Someone claiming in the chat there have been 2 merger eyewall replacement cycles today. Could there be another one? I think there could definitely be an eyewall replacement cycle. I do want to answer this question because there definitely could be an eyewall replacement cycle before the storm makes landfall, but I don't believe the storm's undergone any today.
No, there's
No,
been
I-
no eye wall
I-
replacement cycles or mergers in microwave imagery. Certainly not two of them.
No.
All right. We have another question. When will our next storm update be? We'll actually, after this hour of coverage is done, have a storm update come out an hour or so later, 2 hours later, actually. So it'll be around 3 a.m. UTC. So keep an eye on that. So 2 hours after this stream ends, you can find that update. Another question: when are the next JTWC and Australian updates forecast to come out?
WC will be in about 2 hours. I'm not sure about the Fiji Meteorological Survey.
I'm not sure about the Bureau of Meteorology either. I know that our own David Tones at Force 13 Australia would probably know. We have another question here. How close is the center of Yasa predicted to pass to Suva? I'd assume Suva, Fiji. I don't know exactly where that is. I'm not very good with my geography, but if anyone on the team knows, how close are the current tracks taking this to Suva, Fiji?
Let me have a look.
I forgot which side of the island Suva is, so I don't know.
Suva
either.
is on the south side of the
I believe
western
Suva's
main
on the
island.
It's on the southeast of the main
It's
island.
southeast corner of the main island.
So it's right
Yeah.
about here on this Fiji cone, right about where my cursor is there, right about where Suva is.
It's
Yeah, Suva's
definitely.
on the southeastern side of the main island. Yeah.
So, being in an exposed coastal location, the cyclone could move right down the coast and then have its eye wall move directly over Suva with onshore winds as the cyclone moves away. Now, it would be the weaker side of the cyclone if it does that, but then it would have surge onshore. And then alternatively, if the cyclone makes landfall on the island as indicated by our cone, we're expecting it to move a bit further to the west than Fiji is. Obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainty with this because the track will depend on the intensity the storm is at, and with such high uncertainty in the intensity, then means the track becomes highly uncertain as well, especially when we're dealing with smaller islands in terms of landfall. So it could go either side of Suva or straight through the middle, and each of those three scenarios brings different impacts. There is still a possibility that the eye wall could miss Suva entirely, which would be the best case situation for people living there. But of course, it's too far out to make any reasonable prediction as to where exactly it will go.
I do remember with. Go ahead.
One interesting tidbit that I just want to point out is that Yasa is not originally the first name, the next name that will be used at the end of last season. It was actually Yolanda, but for reason that I could only assume of awkwardness with the Philippines, they changed it in the yearly plan for the basin to become Yasa. A carrier of Yolanda will be very awkward to talk about, I will admit.
Yeah, it would.
There's also another news here. Apparently, that thing in the Mediterranean is designated by ATCF 03M.
Yeah, they named
Yeah.
it. I think they named it Elena, something like that.
I'm sorry. 03M. Wow. Okay.
That's all that I have to say.
Well, why? But why in this time of year?
A December Mediterranean system.
Exactly.
I mean, they do develop more in winter than in the summer because dry air in the summer stops any sort of tropical developments. December through to January is the peak of the Mediterranean quote-unquote tropical cyclone season. More like 1 or 2 storms a year, and when you average out a decade, you get more in the winter than the summer. But regardless, there is a designated system between Cyprus and the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea, and it's going to bring rainfall and some gusty winds to those areas. Flash flooding is a possibility.
With that being said, we have someone else saying, how fast is Yasa moving? It's been increasing in forward speed over the past few hours, I think, but it's still not moving that fast. It's moving...
It's not.
Yeah, it's still fairly slow.
Still is a pretty slow.
I believe last we had it was still about like 2 miles an hour, something pretty slow.
I
that's
think
correct.
it's a little bit higher now. I saw a forecast posted recently.
Yeah, so, but still, it's quite slow.
Yeah.
It is expected to speed up, though, with time, so...
It's expected to speed it up, but right now, because it's just come out of its little loop that it was doing, I think it's about 2 as of now. I could be a little bit faster than that, but probably not by much.
Yeah, certainly. But yeah, I mean... Yeah, I really don't have much else to say on that. Let's move on to the next question here. Someone is saying that a poleward jet will develop according to models which will likely lessen shear and have more good outflow. Can this be verified for Yasa?
This is the system that I was talking about. The poleward jet isn't going to reduce shear, it will reduce the effect of the shear by increasing the atmospheric instability through baroclinic forcing. As I was saying, it's what allowed Michael to it's one of the reasons that Michael was able to intensify all the way up to Category 5 so far north so late in the season. It was what allowed Humberto to intensify in 2019. It was what has allowed Zeta to intensify all the way up to New Orleans. That was a pretty impressive burst intensification. And the difference between those situations and Yasa is that they were developing cyclones that were intensifying up to landfall rapidly. Whereas in this case, we already have a system that's completed its rapid intensification phase and is already a Category 5 cyclone and is not that far off from its peak in terms of intensity. It might get 10 or 15 knots stronger in a worst case scenario, but that's still not that far off compared to, say, Michael, that was 30 knots weaker, more than 30 knots weaker this far out from its landfall. So it's going to have a different effect on a system that's already well established. It might cause a bit of strengthening and then it might weaken. It might induce an eye wall replacement cycle because the convection bursts stronger and causes an outer eye wall to form. Because the system is mature, I'm saying there's a lot more uncertainty in how it will affect it. It's not a weak system that will intensify. It's a strong system that could do many things and unfortunately just leaves it a very uncertain future.
Certainly. We have another question here asking about the thoughts on Zazu and the features of Yasa after it passes Fiji. I think the big question here is, will Yasa and Zazu interact with each other in any way after Yasa passes Fiji? I don't believe they're going to interact, at least directly.
I believe Yasa's outflow is part of the shear that's been impacting Zazu.
You could see it in water vapor imagery here that I have pulled up. The outflow from it is just streaming right into the pore system there.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
It's just killing Zazu off completely.
Yeah. Damn, it really
Somewhat reminiscent to when Teddy, the outflow from Teddy was shearing the heck out of Tropical Storm Vicky in Atlantic. One could say.
Yeah, similar dynamic. Powerful cyclone killing off its weaker brethren.
Yeah.
But there's
I mean,
there's Zazu.
I mean, it is intensifying despite of that, so it's certainly not going down with a spike.
Alright, with that, we have another question. Is there going to be storm surge? Yes. There will definitely be storm surge with this. How much?
I think it's safe to say that we would expect at least 10 feet where the winds are moving onshore and the strongest part of the eye wall, at least 10 feet.
Yeah, I want to
surge is going to be lower because this is an island. It doesn't have a sloping coastal shelf that helps to amplify surge like the Gulf Coast does. That doesn't exist here, so surge will be lower, but it's still likely to be in excess of 10 foot, and that's over a story of water moving towards you. So any low-lying areas would be completely inundated, and we wouldn't be able to survive if you tried to make it through the storm in those low-lying locations.
European model showing the maximum wave heights with the system being up to around 36 feet, significantly higher than the normal, which would appear to be significantly lower at around 5 feet, 5 to 7 feet in normal circumstances. So definitely significantly different. In meters, that's about 10 meters that the wave heights could get up to, quite high according to the European model. The Wave Watcher model using the GFS showing a even more jarring situation with up to 13-14 meters and over 40-foot wave heights being possible. I don't know what that translates to exactly in surge, but what I can say is that that is quite high and extremely dangerous.
Exactly. I mean, if you aren't taking this storm seriously, you're really making a grave mistake here. I mean, hopefully it threads the needle between the two islands. I know, I think actually that the Fiji Meteorological Service, when Winston was active in 2016, I want to say till about 24 or 12 hours before Winston ended up making landfall, they forecasted it to thread the needle between the two main Fiji islands, but we all know what ultimately it ended up unfortunately playing. Not to say that this is going to be a 100% chance of it, making landfall. It could still do that, but never say never with a storm of this magnitude here. Just watch it closely here for our local officials. If they're telling you to prepare for this storm, you do so. This is not a storm to mess around with whatsoever.
Absolutely. I mean, this is up there with some of the worst. It's a Category 5. It's a Stage 8 on the CDPS scale. I mean, it's up there when it comes to the sheer amount of damage that it's capable of causing. We have another question here. Will there be excuse me? Will there be storm surge for the coast of Australia? No. Not as a result of Yasa anyway. Or
not
Yasa.
from this system.
No, not from this system, no.
No, this system will not be producing any storm surge whatsoever, any impacts really whatsoever for Australia at this point.
Just looking at... go ahead.
Someone else asking, what is our estimated wind radii? I don't believe we offer products like that right now, but what I can do is I can tell you that ADT, courtesy of CIMSS, has some really good wind radii estimates, and I will be getting those for you right now. This is the best that we probably have. So extending 165 nautical miles out in the northeast and northwest quadrant are your tropical storm force winds, with your southeast quadrant having tropical storm force winds 145 nautical miles out, and your southwest quadrant having them 135 nautical miles out. Winds of 60 miles per hour or 50 knots or above extend 90 miles out on the northeast side, 80 nautical miles out on the southeast side, 80 nautical miles out on the southwest side, and 90 nautical miles out on the northwest side. And then finally we have our hurricane or cyclone equivalent force winds, which extend 55 miles out on the northeastern side, 45 nautical miles out on the southeastern side, 40 nautical miles on the southwestern side, and 55 nautical miles on the northwestern side. So, not the largest wind radii, but still large enough to produce significant impacts. And again, you can see the radius of your cyclone force winds is below half of that radius of tropical storm force winds, which should show you just how quickly those winds are going to ramp up. Once they begin to ramp up, it's going to be a pretty exponential curve after that.
I am noticing, I don't know if you're noticing it too, Thomas, I'm just looking at the Himawari 2.5 minute target area imagery here, and I'm seeing that the eye is becoming more circular with time, and I'm also seeing some deeper convection trying to wrap around that little part of the northern eyewall that was kind of not as covered by those cooler cloud tops in the earlier frames on the satellite imagery here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing that too. That eye is looking clearer, more circular, and it looks like we're getting those minus 70s more tightly around the eye. That's bad news. That is an improvement in imagery for sure. And you can see those cloud tops look like they're really starting to cool again, to an extent that we hadn't seen for a little while now. So I'm worried that this is the onset of at least at the very least a slight increase in the rate that the storm is strengthening.
You can also see, yeah, the pinks there becoming more prominent there on the western side, and then also on the eastern side there too. If this holds, this is not going to be good news we're looking at here. Let's hope it goes away here, but wow, it's just really unfortunate to see if this holds out. Perhaps another intensifying cyclone here. We're talking about this year. Regardless, bottom line, whether this makes landfall as Category 5, Category 4, does not set aside the impacts the cyclone could bring to Fiji here. I really want to stress that. I know I sound like a broken record, and we've been saying it with many storms this year, but the point remains true. Just because this storm may weaken at landfall, or not be maybe a Category 5 or a Category 4 at landfall, does not mean that you're going to immediately stop seeing life-threatening impacts from this cyclone here. Do not put that into your mind here by any stretch. This is a serious cyclone here. If you're being told to prepare for this system, please do. If you happen to know anybody that lives in the path of this system also, please let them know. Please make them aware of this cyclone too, so they're able to prepare for this ahead of time. They still have about, if I remember correctly, I think it's 36 or 48 hours before the closest approach or landfall of this system, if I remember correctly. But the more time you waste, the less time you have to prepare here. So this again, please take this seriously. If you know anybody that lives down in Fiji, please let them know, make them aware of this cyclone, and tell them to prepare ahead of time, because they don't want to wait to the last minute to prepare for this thing.
Certainly. We have another question here. Will this be getting stronger or weaker as it approaches land? I think at this point, regardless of that, the impacts are still going to be pretty bad. I mean, in worst case scenario for Fiji, you're looking at a storm with Winston levels of strength. And in a best case scenario, you're still looking at a Category 4 Saffir-Simpson, Category 5 Australian easily for Fiji. So regardless, I mean, you're still going to be getting some pretty gnarly impacts, and regardless, preparation should still proceed the same. You should be preparing as if this is the next Cyclone Winston. Even if it's not, that should be the way that this is prepared for. Another question, could this storm increase to a stage 9 or 10 on the CDPS scale? Certainly. Stage 9, definitely. It's awfully close already. It could definitely go over the edge and become a stage 9. We'll see.
If I may, we've had information from Tim that's saying apparently the eye temperature is positive 17 degrees.
Okay,
So that's plus 17. That's really warm.
High.
That is an insanely warm eye.
That is an insanely warm eye, yeah.
There's not really any best case scenario to this, to be honest. It's the least worst. There's no best case scenario, but to be honest with you.
There is no best case scenario.
That's fair.
It's just the least worst.
No. Not with storms of this intensity, no. Something else from Tim as well. Eye is apparently 28 kilometers in diameter.
That's about, what, 22 miles? If I have the calculation correctly?
It's about 17 miles.
About 17, right.
Yeah, about 17 miles would be 28 kilometers.
In diameter. Yeah.
I was about to say in miles per hour.
Yeah.
It's just a little late here, but yeah, it's just no matter how you cut it, you know that this is a serious storm when we start comparing it to some of the top, class, the top tier strongest storms for this part of the world here, like Winston. It's serious when you start to compare it to those storms in their intensity. So I mean, like I said, I can't say it enough. I'm going to sound like a broken record, I know. But if you haven't prepared for this system yet, please do. If you're in the island of Fiji, and if you're in the path of this especially, please do heed all preparations and all information by your local Fiji government agency, and heed that, and try to get through the cyclone the best you can. It's going to be scary, I know, but as long as you're hunkering it down in a sturdy structure and following all the advice given to you by the Fiji Meteorological Service and government, you're going to do just fine. You just got to wait for this to pass through you. It's going to be scary, but it's got to wait for it to pass through you here. It's just really important to see that we're seeing another strong cyclone approaching the country.
It is.
Please don't take anything for granted.
For sure. Next thing that I want to answer real quick, and this will probably be the last question that we really get to for the night. What is the current Dvorak intensity of Yasa? The advanced Dvorak technique currently has this at around a T6.7 or 150 miles an hour. Subjective Dvorak, courtesy of NOAA, over here in the United States, at a 7.0 or 160 miles per hour, a Category 5 system. With that, the Fiji Meteorological Service has just updated, showing a 140 mile per hour wind speed with 917 millibars. And that, I don't know, is that 1 minute or 10 minute?
That's 10 minutes sustained.
I believe it's 10 minutes. So, and given the pressure, you'd think, yeah, they're calling this a Saffir-Simpson Category 5 then. So that is definitely concerning, to say the least, that we do now have multiple agencies really on board with that. And then the final thing that I really want to get to before we touch on something just outside of here, Isaac, we really do have a convective blow-up there on the eastern side of this thing that I've just seen that is really tightly compacted next to the eye. That looks like it's on a path to just blaze around the eye wall. I'm really concerned. Do you think that this could be a sign that this storm is about to resume its rapid intensification? I mean, we've seen the eye become much more circular. We've seen the cloud tops begin to cool again, and now we have this burst of convection just wrapping around. So, I mean, those are that's concerning.
We'll find out here. We'll see if it tries to perhaps make the eye not as circular than it is now, or if it ends up actually trying to wrap around the entire CDO, central dense overcast here, of the system and lead to it perhaps intensifying a few notches here. I mean, regardless, still a serious cyclone for Fiji we're looking at right now, and one to be taken seriously. One to be preparing for. I mean, here for those of you guys that are down there. I mean, it doesn't really get better than this. Let's hope it doesn't get any better than this. But textbook strong cyclone we're looking at here.
Also, some more breaking news. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center has also now upgraded this to a Category 5 system with winds of 160 miles per hour, 914 millibars. So, Fiji, Force 13, and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center have all upgraded the system to a Category 5 system. So that is really some big breaking news towards the end there. I'm really concerned about that, and it looks like it could be strengthening further. Alright, well, that's all the time we have for tonight. This was a really good stream. Thanks to all of you so much for watching. We enjoyed taking your questions, and we are happy to have you here. We'll have a video update coming out later tonight in just a couple of hours, talking about the very latest on the storm, and then we'll be live again tomorrow to talk even more about it. So, to the team, any final thoughts before we go?
For the people of Fiji, hope for the best, if only there isn't one, but expect the worst.
Yeah.
Ow.
When we're gonna talk about, I just want to say, I'll just send this to you in text.
Okay, well, while that's happening, anyone else have any final thoughts?
The Joint Typhoon Warning Centre is saying it could continue for another 12 hours.
That is not
Further
good.
development.
Alright, well, with that being said, we have all kinds of things going on around the world, from potential developments in the Gulf of Carpentaria to the Western Pacific, and we even have a little something in the Mediterranean Sea. But of course, the main focus is Cyclone Yasa. We'll be talking more about it. We'll have an update in 2 hours, and we will also have more live coverage tomorrow. With that being said, we'll also have live coverage on landfall when that does occur. So, with that being said, thank you again so much for watching. We'll see you either in the video update here or on the live event tomorrow. Stay safe, everyone, and if you're in Fiji, we strongly suggest you finish those preparations sooner rather than later.